Hi, I'm Maria Thea Harris-Orvello Sews, and you're listening to a Sewing, Save and Mending podcast. Grab a cuppa and join us.
Sew Organised Style podcast acknowledges traditional owners of country throughout Australia. We pay our respects to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and to the elders past, present and emerging.
Welcome back to Sew Organised Style podcast. Today is one of our Sewing Save series or mending podcasts, and we've got a really special guest that I know all of you who are into mending will be excited to hear from, Kate Sekules. She's found some time in her hectic schedule to come onto the podcast today, and fingers crossed she'll come back again. So welcome, Kate.
Thanks, Maria. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for fitting us into your schedule. I know that you've been flat out with your book, which we'll come to, but more importantly, you're a role model for menders.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you. I had no idea. I get some, we converse on Instagram, but I didn't know. Role model is a big word, but I'll take it. Thank you.
It's a big word and big responsibility, but I know through talking to Katrine of Mending Mayhem, she got started with Mending Mayhem because of mendmarch.
That's right, 2018. Yeah, that was the first one, 2018.
So 2018 was the first mendmarch.
Mendmarch, hashtag mendmarch, and this year will be the fourth.
Brilliant.
Should I tell you about it?
Yes, please.
Okay, so it's a fun, and so what happened in 2018, I'm not very good at Instagram and I hadn't had my account long, but I noticed there's this thing called an Instagram challenge. I thought, oh, okay, you just sort of set a task and put a hashtag on. I'll do that. And this was like February the 27th or maybe 6th, but I thought, oh, mendmarch, that's what I'll do. Made a load of, every day I had a prompt.
Yeah.
And I put it up and said, just play along, do any day you want, drop in, drop out, there's no pressure, but let's just mend together. And it was fantastic. So that's when I met Katrin, and that's when I met a few of my favorite mend friends. And, it's just been getting more and more since then. And it was quite niche in 2018 on Instagram anyway. And it's just getting bigger and bigger. So we have a lot of fun. And it's still got this real community feel, which is really unusual in social media.
Yeah. Just from developing the podcast with Katrine of Mending Mayhem and also the guests who come on to talk about their mends, it's quite clear that it is a really lovely community to be part of. And there are so many artistic, creative people in that space as well. So it's not, here's how you sew a seam, but colour, using what they have available to them is something that the mending community is just used to.
That's right. Well, it's all about using what you have. And, there's this old, and I'm from England, so that World War II slogan, make, do and mend, and people bring that back and that's a hashtag. But in a way, that's just not what it is, because we're not making do. It's really all very creative, and we don't have to mend these days. It's actually quite a luxury to mend because it takes time. And that's ironic because mending throughout history, and I'm sure we'll be talking about that a bit, because I am a historian of mending, and it's been, there's been a lot of shame around it, and it's been you mend from necessity. But now it's really different and it's really creative. And you use anything. I'm a big proponent of just doing it, even if you think you can't, and use whatever you've got. Yeah.
So what got you into the history of mending?
I went academic. I did a master's in costume history in 2017, not very long ago. And, it's like a third act. And I find that academic life really suits me. I love it. So I continued. And during that 2-year MA, I wasn't sure whether to write about or research the secondhand market throughout time or mending throughout time, because neither had been really addressed at all. And now it turns out actually the secondhand market, there's a few people writing about that, but mending, still very, very few, if any, writing about the history of mending, which is the history of clothes and people. It goes back as far as history, and it's very hard to research because it's almost invisible. So that's what I do, and now I'm doing a PhD. So, which will, I hope, also turn out to be a book, you know, a more serious one than the one I've just done.
The academic writing that you are doing, what's the process for then making that into a book? How do you make something that's so academic more user-friendly?
Very good question. And I mean, I've got to mention the book that's just come out recently. It's called Mend, exclamation mark, a Refashioning Manual and Manifesto. And so it's about not just mending, but the whole world around it. And in there, all the chapters are called, you know, what, which, where, why, and when is the history of mending. So I did a, you know, really fast 7,000 year history of mending. But because this is not an academic book and I want people to enjoy it, I've made it, I hope, fun and interesting. And so that's how to do it in a normal book. But in an academic book, I've done some papers and we'll see. I've got some ideas about the structure, but I really don't know yet, is the answer, Maria. I don't know. But by the time I get there, because a PhD is a long thing, it's 5 years in my program. So it's actually not that long. By then, I hope to have found that out.
Okay.
I want it to be readable, though, by the general public. So certainly not that terrible, you know, post structuralist kind of writing that no one can understand. I don't believe in that.
While writing has a lot of facets to it, mending can be really simple.
True. Yeah. Well put. And it should be simple. You know, I really want everyone to try it. And I find that everyone that tries it loves it because, first of all, people who can't sew, you probably don't know any of them, but they exist. People who can't sew, you know, they're intimidated by the whole idea.
Yeah.
I like to get them started. And then your listeners and, you know, people that, you know, a lot of people can sew, but still wouldn't think of trying a mend. Maybe they'd rather make a new thing or just they didn't occur to them or something. But mending has, you know, it's more than just fixing the damage when you do it visibly. So you get an opportunity to personalize something and to embellish it and to make it really yours. And you know Katrine very well. You know what she does. She's got a lovely style, and everyone that tries it has their own personal style. It's like handwriting. So whether you want to or not, once you start, you are likely to find a kind of voice, to use a pretentious word, that you can't use in other kinds of sewing. It's almost like textile art, like fiber art, but just more fun. And you can't really wreck it because it's already broken. You're working on something that you might have thrown away.
That's a really good point. From my background, if something needed mending, you always did it invisibly rather than visibly, for the reason that it was worn out and you couldn't afford something else. So there was
Right.
that shame aspect that you mentioned.
Exactly. So yes, it's really important to remember that, you know, this whole thing about mending comes from necessity.
Mm-hmm.
And we're lucky that if it doesn't come from necessity now, and we're lucky to have the choice of, even if it does, to make something not invisible, because, you know, for centuries, you really wanted to not show that you were wearing old clothes. And now, kind of, apart from old clothes are trendy and your new jeans probably come with ready-made holes, and, you know, there's a whole lot of fashion aspects these days. But invisible mending is hard. It's a lot harder. So now that we do have more choices, you know, if we're lucky, then yeah, why not make it as visible as possible?
Okay, so you talked about jeans.
Yeah.
And how they've already coming to us distressed.
Yes.
I've seen a lot of the visible menders who absolutely love working with jeans and just basic running stitches with contrasting thread.
That's right. And it's inspired by sashiko very often, and also bora, which is, well, there's a whole subject unto itself. We can't do bora because it belongs to history, and it belongs to a period of Japanese history, and it definitely is a kind of mending that caused shame at the time. But the look is very inspiring, and that's what people do on their jeans. I personally don't wear jeans. I know it's awful. They just don't suit me. I decided long ago and never went back. So I don't do jeans, but it's a very popular category for sure. And that's really fun. I kind of wish I had some.
And I think the other thing that jeans allows people to do with mending is not just the stitching, but also the patches.
That's right. Absolutely. Well, I have a whole, in the book, I've categorized all the mend types, and I've got some different ways of, different words for the kinds of patches that you can do. But yeah, they underpatch with the stitching on top around the edges. That's a really big in denim. That's what people do a lot. And it looks amazing. People do beautiful work.
Mending now seems to attract textile artists more so than people who were traditional sewists.
True. Yeah, I think that's the first round of visible menders on the Instagram. I keep mentioning Instagram. I feel a bit bad about that, except that that's where we meet. What are you going to do? At least it's worldwide and all inclusive. So it's doing good work in that department.
I mean, your point around Instagram is also that English is not the barrier, it's visual.
Yeah. I mean, it would be nice to understand some hashtags that get us across language barriers. We've got a lot of Scandinavians because they can always speak perfect English, and Dutch. But, I'm not sure we're reaching the whole, the French and the Spanish and the other Europeans, let alone, Arabic countries and Japan, where they're certainly doing this kind of work. Well, anyway, we'll get there. The textile art, I think, fiber arts is a really big crossover area. And there are I certainly know some who are doing a lot of mending, who are, well, they'll be in mendmarch, let's just say. And there's a lot more to go. I've been doing some talks because of the book, and I've been talking to textile artist groups here and there, and they're really into it. They haven't necessarily heard of it. So that always surprises me because I think it's got everywhere, but it still is a bit niche. It hasn't reached all the corners of fiber world or sewing world.
I think one of the other areas where mending has been found are people who have disabilities. So felting is one of those mending tasks that you can do even if you don't have the motor skills to be able to use a needle and thread.
That is a really good point. And I haven't fully concentrated on that, actually. I haven't taken it in properly, but you're absolutely right. Also, it's really cathartic because it's all stabbing, just stabbing, thousands of stabbing. There's a whole load of, I don't know if you've seen any of the kinds of mends done in mental institutions at the turn of the century, especially. It's not really men's, it's a fiber art. It's sometimes called art brut or whatever you want to call it, but there's some heartbreaking work that is related to visible mending in that it's made up as you go, and it's exuberant and it's beautiful, but it's also in these cases pretty tragic. But I think that it helped those women stuck in mental institutions in a Victorian era because of the stabbing. It's that piercing the fabric over and over and over again. It's really cathartic. And I have lots of mend puns, but one favorite is meditation. So it is very meditative, mending. So meditation, and then there's menspiration, and there's lots more, but I'll hold off
till next time.
Yes, sorry, yes, maybe one or two will slip out.
So the interesting part that I found online about you was where you started from.
What you mean in life?
In your earlier life, your first iteration when you were in a band or when you were doing boxing.
Yes. I know. Yes, a long and varied career. I was in a band, in my childhood. I mean, it was like straight out of school. And yeah, it's what I thought I'd do for the rest of my life. We did, I don't know, do you know who John Peel is? In England, he is a god of a certain sort. He was this DJ who had alternative music show, and did Peel sessions. So he'd get bands in to record especially. So we did 2 of those. And that's my great claim to fame. That and supporting Joy Division.
Ah,
But,
excellent.
in a sort of sweaty, disgusting old Manchester club. I am that old.
My husband is into music and he's just gotten me listening to Disgraceland.
Oh,
So I'm getting a lot of rock history through him.
how good. I bet he's very pleased to be mansplaining rock to you. I don't be rude about him. I'm sure he's lovely, but they do that sometimes, don't they?
They do. I nod my head to him around music just as he nods his head when I talk about sewing.
Yeah, I have a husband like that, oddly enough. But I mean, there's some kind of glazing over that happens sometimes around the dinner table.
Tell us about your boxing background as well.
Yes, well, I came to New York from London sort of accidentally, and also accidentally I found a gym, just aerobics, and the owner was going to Gleason's gym and doing boxing. She was, really ahead of her time. And she started bringing those moves into her class. So I just picked up on that. And long story short, got really into it, went to Gleason's myself and fought professionally, and then wrote a book about it. But I didn't do it to write the book. People think that sometimes, but I didn't really know why I was doing it. So I sort of had to write the book to discover why I had gone all that way into this ridiculous thing, which was unheard of at that moment. And of course now is very normal.
For the amount of training that you would have had to have done to get to the level that you're at, I don't think I would have been doing that just to write a book.
Oh, God, no, that's right. Well, it's been known. I do know someone that sort of did do that around the same, a bit later than me, but I was really annoyed with that at the time because I thought, come on, pay your dues. I'm doing a real thing here. Yeah, 10 years, 3 or 4 or 5 hours a day in the gym, it's a lot. Yeah.
It's nothing to sneeze at.
No, but it's really fun. I mean, it's weirdly reminds me of mending in the way, now you won't know what I mean.
Okay.
What I mean is every time I told a woman back then, this is 92 at the beginning, try boxing, you'll love it. They always did. It was just not just, oh yeah, this is fun, this is cool, but I love this. I'm doing it all the time now. I'm obsessed. This is the same thing that happens with visible mending. It's a different sort of activity, but people really love it, really love it. So I'm just giving mending another plug there, as if just your listeners need it. Or I'm sure they're all mending already.
They are. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then the other thing that you were doing ahead of your time, so boxing was one ahead of the times, your vintage trading and collection.
I always wore vintage. I mean, I grew up around the corner from Portobello Market in London, and since I was 12, I went there on my own twice a week. I just started collecting, but it wasn't called collecting. It was called buying old clothes for 20p. I mean, it was really not a thing, but I never stopped, and I really only like old clothes. There's this hashtag now and this thing that nothing new, hashtag nothing new, or whatever people are calling it. This is something I've always done my whole life. I've hardly ever bought new clothes. After I was in magazines for many years, and then magazines died, and I looked around and thought, what should I do? And I thought there should be a swap for the great old clothes in the back of our closets. I mean, the really good stuff.
Yeah.
And people should be able to swap it, but it should be online. So I did that. And this was before any of those swap things. In the online things, like here, there's the Real, and there's the one called Poshmark, the app, and this trading among yourselves. I want there to be this, and there's no reason you shouldn't do it with clothes you've made either. Just swapping and trading and lending and mending and all of these things. We should have a bit more of a communal attitude to clothes. But yeah, Refashioner was a thing that I invented before those things had happened. And then I discovered I don't really like business at all. So you can see a little bit of it online. I know you've had a look at it.
Yes.
And as long as that I leave that up, it's sort of there as a little show and tell. So what I think is interesting about old clothes is the stories. So with Refashioner, I mean, you can do this trading your stuff online or selling your stuff online, but what I want you to do is tell the story as you pass it on. So with Refashioner, you had to tell the garment story. There was an option, the field that you had to fill in for the story.
That's really helpful. I mean, and that gives people the reason as to what they've done and where it's gone to, so that it's got another life.
Absolutely. And then the previous life goes with it. I think it's lovely to pass it on with, with love, but also with, what you did in it. Oh, I wore this to my sister's wedding, but I'm never going to wear it again. You wear it to your sister's wedding.
Now that you've said passing on, is there someone else in your family who is also into vintage clothing?
Oh, well, yes. Yeah, the good segue there. My daughter, Beatrice, she is 17 now, but she's been wearing nothing but vintage since she was 9. I didn't do that. I swear I never made her, but I think she must have got the idea from me, probably. And it's really fun. I mean, she's got great style and she loves it. So it's a family thing now.
I mean, and I've seen the photos of her wearing her vintage clothes online.
Oh yeah, you know what? She won't let me take those anymore. She was much littler then. Now she won't. She's beautiful and looks great in clothes, and she won't let me take photos.
Oh, that's good. It's good that your daughter has taken on your love for vintage.
Yeah.
And is having fun with it.
Right. And also she's quite politically involved, and she organizes things at her school that she got me to talk to them actually in middle school about fast fashion and all of that, explaining what is going on here, what you're wearing right now, where it comes from, why you might want to think about that. And, made it entertaining, I hope. But yes, she writes about it for her school newspaper, and she'll probably be quite a crusader in her next life. Yeah.
She's got a really good reference with her mum and all the history that you know.
Yeah, she's more into politics, which is not my thing.
Before we end up this podcast about you and mending, what message do you want to leave our listeners?
Well, I guess I'll have to say, please buy my book. It's called Mend! It's published by Penguin in the US. And, I'm really terrible at publicity. And really, I need to do something about that because but thank you because you're helping. No, I don't. So it's really fun. So you won't regret it. It's got a lot of information as well as menspiration in there and instructions.
Does it have a lot of your puns in there?
Oh, it's got a few, yes. I've tried to space them out. I haven't overwhelmed you with horrible puns.
That's great. I think the fact that you've got the historical aspect in your book, as well as the how-to, etc.
And also the why, incidentally, that fast fashion evilness thing. I mean, it's terrible to be beaten over the head and told you shouldn't do something, and it never quite works. So I've tried to make it entertaining and very short, but it does the trick. It gives you the background of what's wrong with fashion. Yeah.
Thanks for putting the book together with all of that information in there, because it sounds like it's going to be a really good resource, not just for now, but in the future.
I hope so, yeah. I want it to be around for a while. It's not it shouldn't age too badly.
Kate, thanks again so much for coming on to So Organised Style podcast.
Thank you, Maria. It's been really fun. I loved it.
Thank you. And have a lovely day, listeners. This episode of So Organised Style podcast for the Sewing, Save and Mending series was produced by me, Maria Theoharis, with permission of Kate Sekules, sound by bensound.com. You can subscribe to So Organised Style podcast, spelt with an S, not a Z, on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and all good podcast distributors. Make sure you listen to previous podcasts by Katrine of Mending Mayhem for ways to take part in mendmarch this year. Next episode will feature Kate of Visible Mend. Send any questions or suggestions you have on our podcast website at soorganisedstylepodcast.com or on our Instagram Soul Organised Style account or on our Facebook page. We look forward to joining you in your sewing room next time. Stay safe, everyone.